Let's have some fun!
Hi there, thanks for tuning in. I've got these offcuts of MDF. Now I don't use a lot of MDF on my furniture work, but if I have to make a shelf and it's going to be painted or a platform, then because of the stability of MDF and its ability to accept paint really nicely, I will use it in that case. Now I end up with these offcuts which I never really quite know what to do with, and it always seems a shame to throw them out. So I thought I would do a painted project and use some of Resene Paint's metallic special effect paints. So I'm going to cut these into some shapes and I'll show you how it's going to come together. Now this video isn't really about how I'm going to cut them, but it's more about how I'm going to paint them and finish them. But I am going to show you a really good trick for getting really smooth edges on MDF, as smooth as the top section. They're factory finished, so therefore they only need a slight sand and you can paint them. Whereas the edges, as you'll know if you've worked with it, are very porous and very rough, and it doesn't matter how much you sand them, unless you do my trick to them, you won't get them really nice and smooth. Pieces of MDF are cut to size and they're sanded, and the edges here I've just taken them off so they're nice and smooth. And I just want to clarify what I meant about the edge preparation and my little trick. What I should have said is that if you're using a waterborne acrylic undercoat, then as soon as that acrylic undercoat touches an unsealed edge of MDF, it will swell the fibres inside, making it all rough again. And even after sanding, when the primer undercoat is dry, it will never be the sharp, or should I say rather smooth edge that you really want. So you can't actually, I've done one of these, this one's actually been done, and what I basically do is, and I will show you later on, is I put a diluted solution of PVA on there and I let that dry, and that effectively seals and plasticizes, if that's the word, puts a plastic coating on the edge. So when the undercoat primer goes on there, it won't sink into the fibres. It's as simple as that. Now whether or not I need to do another coat of that on there, I don't actually know. I would do on furniture for sure, but I'll show you how to do that in the next clip. So I've got some PVA glue, which is, I said PVA alone on the last clip. I should have said PVA glue, which is a wood glue for people that are not familiar. Very versatile, water-based glue, and I've mixed it so it's sort of that consistency. It's probably about 40% water in there. I can't be more precise because I mixed this some time ago, and I know what I'm looking for, so I just sort of do it, and without really taking a lot of notice. So that's what you're sort of looking for. And it's a bit odd really, because what we're doing is we're actually putting water on here, which is the very thing that swells the fibres. But what you're actually doing is the water swells the fibres, then the plastic, you can see I'm dripping all over the place, but you put plenty on there, but then the plastic within the glue then wraps its way around the swollen fibres, and when it dries the water disappears and you're just left with these fibres covered in the plastic effectively. And then with a 400 grit paper, you gently sand the tops of the fibres off, leaving a very smooth surface. As I say, depending on how well you've done it the first time, you might need to do it again. And it's a little bit of a suck it and see principle on this, because until you put the waterborne primer undercoat on, you don't know if you've really got it or not. So it might be worthwhile, if you're not too pressed for time, in doing a second coat. So first coat, let it dry, sand it off with a 400 grit. Give it you don't have to be mad about cleaning it all off, because you're effectively going to seal the dust in there anyway, so it doesn't actually matter. That doesn't sound great, but it really doesn't. And then you're going to sand again anyway. So I hope that's not too long-winded. And just as it's worthwhile just thinning out this here, because it will cut down this overspill. It will cut down on your sanding, because that needs to be sanded off flat. So I'm just starting to sand the edges of the ones that are dry. That I hope I'm not going overboard with this, but it is really important for the piece to look any good, to get these edges sealed. Just for those wondering, the reason that the edges are so rough is that this goes through whilst been manufacturing, this goes through rollers, which I believe heat treats them. So this top surface and that surface there is actually sealed through the process. So you never want to actually sand too much on MDF on this surface. You just want to make sure it's clean and the edges are taken down. Now, when it's done, it's got a slightly darker colour than when you've put the PVA on. And all you're looking to do, and I hope I can get this on the camera, is you're just looking to see white powder. I should be really wearing a mask, but obviously you won't be able to hear me. That's all you're looking for. And to get a white look, or a whiter look, all over the surface. And of course, just gently, very gently, do the edges. You don't want to go through to the wood. And that is now beautifully and smooth and sealed. If you do put the primer on and it swells up, then it's annoying, but all you really need to do is just wait for the primer to dry, put some more PVA on, and then give it a sand. You can hear that. Well, hopefully you can. It's a different sound. Well, the boards are all prepared. I did do a second coat of PVA glue on the edges. I thought there wasn't any point risking the finish, and I've suspended the boards off the surface so I can get to both sides of them and get a nice finish on the edges. I'm going to use Resene Quick Dry primer undercoat, which is what's recommended, and as a base coat I'm going to use Lumberside Fahrenheit. Now all of these metallic finishes that you see here do have different colour base coats. Now if you were doing a door, you know, an area of or a big area, then you would need to use the recommended base coat. But I'm going to try this Fahrenheit. I've had it for another job. I don't know how it's going to turn out. I really don't. I haven't done any testers, but I think it's going to be all right. These metallic finish paints are translucent, so the base coat might show through, and I'm just going to risk it. Often mistakes work out the best, so let's see how that goes. So I've started to do the primer undercoat on these, and I realised I made a bit of a mistake. I didn't use long enough screws or a clean enough board. If I'd used longer screws, it would have kept them off the surface further. And what I'm doing is I was hitting the brush, or sorry, the roller on this. Although I've given it clean, it's still quite dirty. So for these ones, I've put some masking tape on there, which is nice and clean. Might look like I've missed a couple of areas. I haven't done. When they all go together, it won't matter. But that one I didn't need to do, but there we go. So I recommend that you do the edges first. This is going to give, using this test pot roller, is going to give a stipple effect. I don't see that on these small bits that I'm going to get a lovely smooth effect, and the stipple looks good with a metal finish anyway. There will be a top coat of gloss going over it, so it will give that sort of shiny metal look in the end anyway. So now it can be with these small rollers that it binds on the primer. So what I do is, if that happens, it's not at the moment, but I'll just show you what I do. I just give it just a little spray of water. I'm sure that's not in the instruction book, but the water will just evaporate. The trick is not to get too much. It's actually binding more since doing that. Probably need a little bit more paint on there. This will be sanded anyway afterwards, just giving a light sand to take the nibs that form with it. You see, you can do it too much, but just this is drying quite quickly actually. Anyway, I think you get the gist of that. I won't record any more of, because you're not going to see the back here anyway. The primer has dried, and I've given it a light sand off. Now I've noticed when I'm watching videos, there's a wide range of different grits of sandpaper, so if you're new to this, it can be a bit bewildering on which one you should actually use. Now, a lot of things, as I say, I've seen and I've also read, they say when you're sanding down primer is to use something around about a 240 grit. I've even heard people say 180, which is fine on these flat areas. But as soon as you start doing these edges here and around there, I find that grit is too coarse and you end up taking off your primer. So what I prefer to use is the 400 that I was using earlier on these edges when I was putting the PVA glue on them. I find that you're less likely to take those edges off, and it brings it up fine. There's no problem with that at all. It's quite smooth enough. So that's just my little tip, my take on it. I'm not saying that's right. It's just what I find that's best. So now I'm using the Resene lumber side, which is forming the base coat. Now the wonderful thing about all these products I'm using, they're all water based, so all the rollers and the trays and everything washes out in water, which is great. It speeds up the project no end. But please do get as much of the paint out of the roller back into the tin to be used again, roller and the tray in this particular case, and then wash what's left out in the garden on the grass with a garden hose, and not down the drains into the water system. In the garden, at least what happens is, because that's far from ideal really as well, but you know, given that we have got to do these things, it's the best option that the DIY has got. But at least doing it in the garden, it filters through the ground, and by the time it hits the dirty water hits the water table, it's been filtered through. So just bear that in mind. This is going on really nicely. By the way, this is a little test pot roller and tray that I got from Resene when I was buying the paints. It's $5 and it's really good. You don't use a lot of so much paint, and it doesn't, you haven't got such a large tray to actually to clean out, so it's absolutely ideal. I'm really chuffed with it actually. I've never had a roller quite so small before. So I know it's dull, you can't even see what side I'm doing. Well, you can see what side I'm doing, but you can't see me doing it. So that's that. Okay. Just a little bit more on the primer, especially for those of you that, of course, you can't see any edges here. But this might be in shot here. So I've been left with what I'd call a very slightly textured feel to it when after I've sanded it, and that's particularly because I'm using the roller. That's the point I'm getting at. But that'll be ideal for a metal finish. I think it's going to look really good. Right, I'll carry on with the rest of these, and I'll see you again when these are dry. Just getting the edges off here, making sure they're nice and clean. And yeah, when they're nice and dry, I'll give them a quick rub over, and then we'll be on to the metal special effects paint. I'm not sure how much of me you can see in this shot, but that certainly isn't important. I've put the first colour on here, and one on the end there, which is this copper, this beautiful copper colour. And we've got a close up here because it's absolutely vital that these metallics and special effects paints are put on in a certain way. It's all in this leaflet here, and it's very specific, so it's worthwhile having a look at that if you're using these Resene paints. So we've got a close-up so you can see exactly what I do. Okay, so I've got the roller loaded. I've stirred the paint. Now I can't tell you how important it is to stir the paint, and I don't mean just a 30-second stir. I mean even those little pots need about 3 minutes, and really work at them to get them thoroughly mixed. You're mixing little metal flecks and all of it together. It all really needs mixing up to get that uniform colour. So definitely do the edges first. It's a bit sticky here. I'm going to have to flip the roller to get it to go. So definitely do all the edges first here. Work out to that edge and then work out to this edge. Going to load a little bit more on here. I know you can't see this one, but so down to the bottom edge and then up to the top edge and then just over all of it like that. So I've gone in the same direction all the way over. A bit more paint. And I'm not sure I've actually put enough in here to do this whole side. Let's hope I have. Okay, so I'm going to look like I'm not doing this too carefully to begin with. I just want to get it all on. Only problem with doing the top first is you can't steady it with your the board with your finger. But it is important to do those edges first. Okay, I'm going to be doing 2 coats of this. There's no doubt about that. Okay. Right, and this is the important bit. I'm going to lay off, see it's just scraped there. I'm going to go back there to put it back on there. Put it back on, but then I'm going to go. Frustrations of it. Right, I'm going to have to start again. I don't know if my head's in the way. All in the same direction upwards to finish off. And then all the flecks are in place. So definitely a second coat. You can see it's not as translucent as I thought it would be, but there are areas where you can still see the base coat coming through, which is hardly surprising.
Rick has left the workshop.